like Mario.
It does sound like Mario. Did I just win all the gold coins?
I think you did.
Okay, here you go.
Thank you.
Yeah. How's it going? This is Dave with Miracle Canine Training. Just giving you a call in regards to the contact form I got from you. Looks like you have a dog you're looking for some training help with. You can give me a call back whenever it's convenient at 440-503-0701, and I'd love to discuss training options. Thanks. Making a lot of noise over there. Jeez.
We're just setting off a bomb.
Yeah. Kombucha. Barking at things out of the window has got to stop. I don't care what he's barking at. Okay. It's not his business to be intimidating things outside of the house, because it always turns into issues. If the barrier isn't there, what would he be doing? Right. He would be going after it, right? So you can't have your cake and eat it too, from the standpoint of a lot of people are like, oh, I like when my dog barks until I tell them to stop and stuff. It's like, no, that's not what's going on in their mind, totally, right? Be happy. Yeah, you just gotta just nix it, you know. You know, you talked about the control with or without the e-collar, right? So that's normal. Like I always say, I understand that, you know, I understand where people are coming from when they say, you know, I want to feel like I still have some control over him if I don't have the e-collar on. Yeah. The problem is there's steps that lead to that point, right? So if you look at what we would typically refer to as like a collar-wise dog, which just means that they know when the e-collar is on, they know when the e-collar is off, and they behave differently whether it's on or whether it's off. That is an owner-created behavior, right? That's not something that we just like teach him to not be. Yeah, and this is normal. This is not in a blaming way or anything. This is just an education thing, right? So collar-wise, how we create a collar-wise dog is we train the dog in a particular way, right? We train the dog to respond to, you know, commands, and they understand the consequences for not listening to those commands and this and that. And we do one of two things that creates a collar-wise dog. One is we're very inconsistent about when the e-collar is not on, we still ask the dog to do a lot of things, right? And what happens is they immediately realize sometimes there's a correction if I don't listen to this, and sometimes mom just yells at me if I don't listen to this, which they obviously don't care about, right? And they start making the connection that the difference is when that collar is on, right? The second thing that people will do that creates a collar-wise dog is they try to fade out that e-collar before the dog has hit a point where they're 100% fluent in the commands. So what I mean by that is if we want our dog to listen without the e-collar on, we have to first make sure the dog listens 100% of the time without the need of a correction when the e-collar is on. Does that make sense? Yeah. And we skip that step a lot of times, right? We hit a point where it's like the dog listens and we need to give corrections every now and then for it and stuff like that, but the behavior is still contingent on that consistent reinforcement, and then we try to just fade it all together, right? Right? And then we're like,
yeah, we've always used the e-collar because we don't have a fenced-in yard.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Outside, he has it.
So situationally, you always use the e-collar, right, obviously, which is fine, right? I use it situationally with my dogs as well. I don't use it all the time at this point because my dogs do have reliability without it, obviously. But there's three scenarios. 100% of the time, I always put it on, right? When people come over the house, if we're going off leash anywhere, or if we're going to any sort of public setting, right? So anywhere there's a possibility there's going to be high distractions, it always goes on in those scenarios. But until we've hit a point where just in the house hanging out with him and stuff, we don't need to use it, it should be on in those scenarios as well, right? And there's tips and tricks to, you know, again, how do we make sure we're, oh, don't worry about that right now. If he barks at her, she's used to it. You know, and there's tips and tricks as far as how do we make sure that we don't miss an opportunity to correct the dog, how do we inhibit a behavior as opposed to just manage a behavior, this, that, and we'll get into all those things, right? But I like to shift initial goals and expectation a little bit, you know, to realistic things, which is first and foremost, we need to make sure with the e-collar on, he's 100% reliable, okay, right? Then you get into some of the other things you brought up, right? So the puppies, for example, right? Here is a common issue that I see people run into, right? Especially in the rescue world or the foster world or any of those types of things, right? They have a dog, right? That's not an aggressive dog, right? I'm sure he's not a, you know, you wouldn't have been able to go to daycare for so long if he was an aggressive dog, obviously. you wouldn't be able to have him around puppies at all if he was an aggressive dog, right? But maybe on the spectrum of social, maybe instead of being all the way over here, he's like over here.
He's probably over there.
You know what I mean? If it's constantly different dogs, you know what I mean? We're not establishing these really deep, strong relationships with them where we could set that boundary really effectively. You know what I mean? Where if I have a trained dog, like with my dogs at this point, right? They're trained, right? So if he's laying there and he's, whatever, chewing on a toy or he's trying to take a nap or something like that, and one of my dogs either tries to go and take the toy or goes to mess with them while they're taking a nap or something like that, before they even do that, I'm stepping in and I'm setting that boundary. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So before, let's say puppy's over here, he's over there, and puppy's like, oh, I want to go jump on him, right there. Nope, you're not doing that. Right? That's my job to prevent that from happening in the first place. Right? Does that make sense? So by doing that, and by doing that before it hits a point where it's hit the threshold on him where he's like, I need to handle this situation, if we're properly advocating and we're setting that tone ourselves in that situation, he starts seeing you as the one to handle it. His stress overall starts coming down. And then if once in a while it does happen where the puppy gets to him and I don't get a chance to set that boundary, he'll let out a more controllable correction.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's not one of those things where we just teach him to correct more appropriately.
Okay.
We have to reduce some of the stress so that he doesn't feel like he needs to correct in such a crazy way.
Sense to me, yeah.
Right?
Okay.
So much of this stuff really comes down to not so much training the dog.
Training me.
Exactly, right? It's teaching you, especially if you're going to be fostering and stuff like that, how do I manage this household effectively? You know what I mean? And then you get into, okay, cool, dog doesn't have training, how do I appropriately set the boundary? Because it can get real frustrating if there's a puppy and you're like constantly like grabbing him, moving, you know what I mean? And like not getting anywhere with it. That's where I like to have alternative ways to be able to set boundaries. So things like, pet correctors, which are like a little can of compressed air, or squirt bottles, or things like that to be able to give small little discipline corrections and stuff to the puppies to set those boundaries effectively is going to make it so you're not constantly micromanaging all the time, and you could actually set a boundary and then be like, oh, I care about that boundary, so I'm just going to respect it. You know what I mean? So you said something about like getting out, you got out of the house or something?
So he's gotten out of the front door, slipped out of the front door twice. Both times he didn't have the collar.
Yeah.
And
was it like recent that happened?
that's what prompted me to come here, was this last one time he did that. He did it
just like a week or two ago?
And then he just did it again. He slipped out maybe a month ago.
Yeah.
And I was talking to Nikki from the rescue, and she's like, you should go to Miracle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're twofold, right? So one, obviously, stopping that reactivity just out the window or out the door in general is your first step of the equation. Well, yes and no, right? So it will help it from the standpoint of if I teach him you can't react when you're behind a barrier, he's less likely to do it when the barrier is open, if that makes sense, right? So we'll teach him to be a little bit more neutral to the dogs in general. But any dog, given the right situation, that will happen. And that's a common thing I'll have people call me about is my dog slipped out the door, and let's say he wasn't even acting aggressively, right? Let's say he was just
he was sniffing.
Well, what?
Then,
yeah. So whatever. So in some cases, let's say he was just like, oh, dog, I like dogs, and he went flying out that door, chasing down that other dog. Any dog with that amount of arousal bolting towards them, that's going to create a fight.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I agree, and that's the whole lunging thing that freaks me out.
Kind of. They're
okay.
Yes and no, right? So it's the same deal, right? So lunging on the leash, right? So leash reactivity, right? If we're walking down the street, he sees another dog, he's lunging, he's barking, stuff like that.
Every time.
It's situational, right? Like again, so like different dogs, they respond differently to them. It's not like, it's not like I don't hate every person that I see, obviously, but there's some people that rub me wrong, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's the same deal with dogs. It's not that they hate, because he's not an aggressive dog, right? But certain dogs rub him wrong for whatever reason. It could be their energy on the leash, it could be their temperament that he's kind of feeling, stuff like that, right? But it's the same concept. It's behind a barrier. A leash is a barrier, a window's a barrier, a door's a barrier, a fence is a barrier, right? Regardless, stopping that arousal in those situations while they're behind that barrier will make them less likely to do it when they're not behind that barrier, right? But again, that's the 50% side of things of addressing the dog. The other side of things I always tell everybody is, It hasn't happened often, obviously, but even once a year, right, we'll get this dog put down eventually, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So whatever you need to do to, regardless of if he's reacting out the window or not, whatever you need to do to ensure that there is absolutely no chance he's gonna slip out that front door, that's the other side of things that you gotta get under control. Because I hear it so much. People are like, you know, my dog's great, but they keep getting out the front door or something. I'm like, that can't happen.
It happen to us.
Yeah. But it can't happen ever, though. You know what I mean?
With him, it just can't happen.
Yeah. Well, with any dog, it just can't happen, obviously.
I mean,
but
people look at him and they run away.
Sure. So I'm assuming you guys worked on heeling and stuff in your classes?
Yeah, I'm not too good at that, and neither is he.
Okay. Well, why don't you try to get him to do so, however you were instructed on doing that?
Just heel. Yeah, we're gonna go up a little further and we're gonna cross into this little park here and then we'll start working on something. All right, so two kind of things here, right? So one, right now, I mean, pretty much everything, he is not caring at all about what's on the other end of that leash, right? He's doing him right now. Whatever he wants.
Yeah, oh yeah. He's doing whatever. He wants to stop and sniff this, he's sniffing this. He wants to pull ahead a little bit, he's pulling ahead a little bit. You know what I mean? And he's not like a crazy, like he's yanking you all over the place by any means, right? But he's definitely not paying a whole lot of attention to what it is you're trying to get him to do, right? So my first question is here, so you said you've done 2 training programs so far, right? I know Elite, they do relatively good work, obviously, right?
I went to Paramount.
Or Paramount, I'm sorry, Elite and Paramount, they're very similar. Okay. So Paramount as well, right? They do relatively good work over there, right? How were you trained to enforce your heel position?
How was I trained to get him next to me?
To enforce your heel position.
I mean, from just stop, sit, and then say heel. Stop, sit, and then say heel.
Yeah, but how were you trained to enforce it? So you're telling me what commands you were using. How are you trained to enforce those commands?
That way. As far as I know, when he's not heeling, stop, sit,
okay,
and then try again. Stop, sit,
yep,
and then try again.
So what were you trained to do with the e-collar?
He's not, I wish I wasn't doing it. If he's not heeling, then stop. Gus, no, heel.
Okay, so now you're telling me how it's enforced.
Right, okay.
That was what right? So,
sorry.
So my question is, right, so he wasn't doing that at all, right? He wasn't like paying attention and heeling with you, right? So then we get into, we have to be right? Like, so dogs only rehearse behavior if those behaviors are enforced, okay, right? Now, I would enforce it slightly differently from the standpoint of the stopping and the sitting and all of that is unnecessary because we care about heel right now, right? We don't care about sit, right? But if I'm giving a heel command, right, and he's not doing that heel command, it has to be enforced with the e-collar.
Okay.
Right? So let's do this. Why don't you take your remote off? You're gonna have it in your hand here. Have your left hand, do you walk up on your right side typically?
Yeah.
That's fine. Have your left hand on the button, obviously.
Okay.
What you're gonna do is you're gonna give your heel command one time here, just one time. You're not gonna say anything else aside from heel right when you start walking, right? Mm-hmm. From there, if he's not heeling, you're gonna tell him no and tap the button. That's it.
Okay.
So tell him heel.
Heel. Gus, heel.
So tell him no.
No.
Did you tap your button when you said no?
No.
All right, so let me see the remote real quick here. Is it on?
Yeah.
I'm gonna hit the vibrate here. Is it vibrating?
Yeah, it's vibrating.
Okay, yeah, you can tighten it a little bit more, obviously.
So once we know we're doing things correctly, right, and we're giving our enforcement, right, or we're giving our corrections, if he's not listening at that point, it's a motivation issue.
Okay.
Right?
Motivated.
Well, he doesn't care enough about the correction, right?
Okay.
Right there, if he was feeling that, right, when his nose was on the ground, his nose didn't even budge when you hit that button, right?
No.
Which means he doesn't care about it, right?
Okay.
So that would mean we have to increase the level then. So what we're gonna do here, that looks tight enough. So we're gonna do this again. You're gonna tell him heel, you're gonna start walking. I want you gotta eliminate the fluff though, right? So you said like Gus, 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 like
No.
just heel, right?
All right.
And you're just gonna say it one time, right? If he doesn't heel at that point, you're just gonna tell him no.
Okay.
Got it?
Okay.
Let's try that now.
Heel. No.
And you tapped when you said no as well. Let me see the remote. So do you think he cared about that correction?
No.
So we're gonna go up a little bit more. Let's try again here.
Heel.
There we go. Do you think he cared about that one? A little bit more, so that was good. So now it's a matter of just consistently setting that boundary.
60.
Yep. So is this healing?
No. No.
There we go. Give him a little more slack on that leash. And we're just gonna keep on walking here.
No.
Perfect. Now this is gonna be hard for him initially. You can make a left up here. It's gonna be hard for him initially because he's not, you haven't done this in a while with him, right?
Right.
How long has it been since you've really enforced this position? Probably a while.
Probably about 2 years.
Which, listen, it's fine, things happen, I get it, right? So we're gonna have to consistently set that boundary a couple times so he then understands where that boundary is, right? So we're essentially reteaching this right now. But this is the first time that I've seen him be aware of you, right?
Okay.
Now he's a little distracted by the workers up there, but he's checking in with you still, or at least he was
looking
checking
at
in
me,
with
yeah.
you. Yep. This is what I mean about talking about, when we talk about barriers, right?
Yeah.
Human-made barriers, doors, windows, leashes, cars, stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Those don't make any sense to dogs. And a lot of times, we'll make it right here. A lot of times what we find is if that barrier wasn't there, if this leash wasn't on him at the beginning of that walk, he would have been nowhere near you, right?
Yeah.
But now he's paying attention to you.
Yeah.
There's no tension on that leash. He's keeping himself with you. So if we can get enough consistency with this, right?
Yeah.
And we can get him doing this more reliably like he is right now, what's gonna happen, perfect.
Heel.
What's gonna happen is you're not even gonna need the leash then, right? Now, I'm not telling you to go walk them off leash all the time, but what I'm saying is we become less contingent on those things. So if we accidentally leave the front door open, right? Or we accidentally drop the leash or something like that, he's not just gonna take off. You can make a right here.
Scared. I just want him to be a good person.
Sure. A lot of that has to do with us being good for our dog. You know what I mean? A lot of times we get really hung up on the dog. You know what I mean? Like he needs to be better. In a lot of cases, we need to be better. You know what I mean? And again, I don't say that in like a blaming, like you're screwing everything up or anything. But that's the reality of things. When we have big, strong dogs, it's extra important for us to assume that responsibility of we are in charge. We have adequate control over our dog.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that comes down to being strict about enforcing the rules. That's it. Is starting to inhibit that barking in the house.
Okay.
Right? So that's the big other thing we got to get under control is absolutely any barking in the house at things outside of the house has to be corrected for. Now, we're not going to be giving commands for that or anything, right? We're simply going to create a boundary for those things. So your e-collar is going to be on him over the next week anytime you're out in the house with him. Your level is going to be set even higher than that. It's probably going to be set like 80, 90, somewhere around there, right? Maybe higher than that depending on how he responds to it. And you're gonna have that thing on you, and anytime you hear him, why don't you grab his leash real quick here?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay, just in case we got any dogs coming in. And anytime we hear him starting to bark or kind of freak out at anything outside of it, all you're gonna do is you're gonna tell him no, then you're gonna tap the button.
Okay.
That's it, right? And we're gonna start consistently saying, when you do this, this is the consequence for doing it.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So and he's like, hell no, I want to sniff this over here, right? If we can get that under control, right, and you start feeling confident that you have better control over him, that's gonna alone be a massive shift in the right direction, right? From there, I want you just focusing on when he's around the puppies, setting boundaries for him for the puppies. This is not a puppy issue, or sorry, this is not a him issue, this is more a puppy issue.
So setting boundaries for
to the puppies.
To the puppies.
Yeah, like I said, squirt bottle, pet corrector, whatever you need to do. When they start messing with him, you need to be the one that steps in and disciplines them instead of him being the one to do so.
Okay.
Right?
All right. So you don't think that he wants to kill the puppies?
I don't think so. I think he's probably getting a little frustrated that you're not helping him out.
Okay.
I think that's it.
Okay. Very good. Understood.
Questions on any of those things?
No.
I think this was very productive. I think we got to the bottom of a lot of things. What I would like to see you do is I would like to see you work with him for the next week here.
And then come back for another.
And then give me a call, give me an update in like 7 days. Be like, hey, he's doing really good with the walk. The barking is getting under control, whatever. This is where we're still having problems. Then we'll get you back in and we'll work on the next things we need to work on.
Sounds good.
Does that sound like a good plan?
Yeah.
Do you have any questions on anything?
No.
Okay. I'm gonna give you my card here, my cell phone. So like obviously, if you get into the mechanics of like holding dogs that are stronger than you, right? So there was a lot that we learned about this kind of stuff in like the sport dog world, because there's a lot of like really small little like people, right, that have these shepherds or Malinois stuff when they're doing bite work that are on harnesses that they're needing to tether back, right? And it's funny, we would watch people, like when we would go to some of these seminars and stuff and see, you know, people handle their dogs, and we'd watch some people and it'd be a disaster, even like bigger people, right? And then we'd watch some people that had really good control, and all of it came down to using your center of gravity and your strongest points, right? It's like they used to talk about, like, you know, jujitsu, like if you're really good at jujitsu, right, you should be able to control somebody that's much bigger than you, like with very little like force and physical strength. So it's all about technique here, right? So I always, anytime I'm working with a dog like this, leash grip obviously is important. I get a really, really good firm grip on that leash. I'll typically do a double grip like that, right? And then I keep it as close to my center as I can. And whatever you do, you don't want your arms out here, right? So I hold my center here and I let my weight do the work, right? So if I need to do a 180 pop, right, I'll turn, pop, and go, right? And I didn't even need to like move my arms or anything. I just turned and then body push into it, right? So little techniques like that are gonna go a long way as far as you just feeling confident, as far as just physically holding him, you know? And then obviously to be able to get a little bit more power in your corrections too. Do you remember the part where they're playing in the tournament, right? And there's only one guy left, and it's like the nerdy guy with the glasses, and he's like, "You've got to get angry. I want you to get mad." And he looks over and he sees his wife like schmoozing up with some like guy on the stands or something like that, and he gets just furious and just like wins it. Sometimes I feel like when I'm instructing like owners and stuff to like work with dogs like this, sometimes I feel like I'm like, you've got to get tough, you know? And like teach them to just like fake being something that they're like not, because, you know, you get into like the Caesar stuff of all like, you know, like the dogs sense the energy and this and that, and so much of this has to do with him seeing us as like, we are in control right now. You know what I mean? Like when I go out with him, there's not going to be that concern in my mind of like, I'm going to lose control over him, or he's going to get spooked by something or this or that. It's, I have control over this dog, right? And that's kind of like, you're going to have to kind of like tap into that mentality a little bit with him, you know? And obviously like, no, you have the mechanics and stuff to work through it, but kind of go into it with that thought. Same deal, firm leash, and like all this, don't worry, let me see this real quick. I always like the thumb through, grab around, so you got it like anchored in there really good. Where if you start getting into like twisting and stuff, this is not strong. You know what I mean? Like it feels stronger, but it's not at all. Where this is anchored into your hand, and if you got it at your center, when you need to make your pops, you could use your body language, and it's more natural, right? So there's a lot to like how you're holding that. So right hand, thumb through, wrap around, other wrapped around behind it, almost like a baseball, right? And then you're just gonna go, right? you have a wrap around the whole thing. So there you go, but let it pull this down. There you go.
Yes.
And then wrap your hand around that. There you go, you got it. And then, especially if I'm working with a dog that's like potentially stronger than me, any like corrections I need to give or anything, you're not playing around with them. Really, really firm with them. Set that tone right off the rip. It's funny, he is like literally bigger than her. I know, it's so hard. So we're just gonna let him chill there for a minute.
This is what happens to, like, even if I were to step outside to
Sure.
grab the mail, like, it's just,
Total freak out.
he loses his mind. He can
Yep.
see me the whole time.
Yeah, we see a ton of dogs like this. We get a lot of separation anxiety cases in, and it's kind of funny because it's like almost predictable like how the process goes at this point where, you know, again, we see that they do really well over the course of the training program. They see the owner again, their brain just immediately switches right back into that state of mind, and then you see that slow progression over the next like 2 days or so of him then evening back out with it, you know?
Yeah.
It's got like peaks and valleys. It's just how it works.
Well, we adopted him too, it was like November of 2019.
Sure.
So then we had him for like a couple months and then, like,
Then you're home all the time with him.
yeah, so he's like never known,
Sure.
especially you've been home.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's some things you could do to help with that. Like, obviously, I'm empathetic. We have a lot of people that work from home. We have a lot of people that just don't leave the house very often. And things like this is one of the best ways to create some of that separation. Or else you could find yourself in the trap of, even if I go like 2 days where I'm at home, you find yourself in the trap where your dogs are just with you all the time, you know? So I try to find places where I could keep them in another room for a little bit. Or if I'm outside doing yard work, I leave them in the house and I set some boundaries with it where they're not sitting at the window pacing, freaking out, wondering what I'm doing. I use my crate a lot even if I'm home. You know, stuff like that. Do you guys use a kennel with him at home?
We do when we leave.
A lot of times the getting onto the bed is the easy part for them. It's the holding it that's the hard part. And it's the holding it that's the most beneficial part, because if you look at the places you would typically be using this, guests coming over the house, cooking, eating, situations where you need to get them out of the way but you don't want to put them away, that are going to be a little bit more prolonged of periods. And then when you have your baby, this is going to be like your like magic tool that you use with him, you know. Creating plenty of separation, you know, making sure he realizes. I think one of the concerns you had in your questionnaire was you didn't want him to start guarding the baby from you or something like that. Was that it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so understandable, obviously. So right off the rip, that first like month or so that the baby is home, I would say that's our job, to set those boundaries right away, where we're not even really giving him that much time to interact and explore and stuff. And we're basically telling him right away, hey, this thing is ours, right? You don't have to worry about what's going on over here. And then once we kind of get him into that state of mind, then we could start the introduction process. I think a lot of people make the mistake with children, like having babies and stuff like that, of they feel like they need to get the dog to like introduce to the baby, and they try to give them clothing and stuff like that to sniff, when all you're doing is basically just saying like, hey, like this is like a toy, right? This is yours. You know what I mean?
Makes sense.
That first month is like essential of just setting those boundaries, and usually if you do that, you're smooth sailing after that.
Should I do another? Or?
Yep, let's do one more.
Okay.
There we
You
go.
mentioned cooking. For whatever reason, anytime we turn on the stove, he immediately runs upstairs.
Like away from it, like he's scared
And he's terrified.
of the stove.
Of our old house, we had an electric
Yeah.
stove, so like, I kind of get it now, we have a gas one, so I'm
Like the stove top, you're talking the clicking and stuff?
anything, and once he knows there's cooking happening,
Sure.
he takes off. I don't know.
It's not even just a stove, it's like anything.
Yeah.
Oven,
Like
yeah.
anything.
So you get back into acting, you know, like we could sit here and figure out all day long, like, why is he so terrified of the stove? And, you know, I try to look at things my dog is scared of, and I ask myself, is there like a justifiable reason why they would be scared of it? Something like that, not really, you know what I mean? Like nothing, the stove isn't biting him, you know what I mean? So that's where you get into things the dog is scared of and then acting on those fears, right? That act of him, when he hears that stove go on, taking off, it's not that he's trying to give himself space that's the problem, but usually what we see is in those scenarios, if we need to get our dog back under control, we can't. right? If I need to get him to do something or focus in or something like that, it's very difficult to do that because he's just too cycling in that fearful state of mind, right? So by implementing a bed stay or something like that, a down command, whatever, in the presence of that thing and teaching him instead of fleeing, you just have to focus on this thing right now, you could get them realizing, okay, it's all right to be around this and nothing bad is happening. You know what I mean? And we start to gain that control in those fearful states, which again gives us that kind of leadership capital we're looking for of when he's scared of things, as opposed to feeling like he's on his own and he needs to run or hide or act out or whatever, that he can look to you guys for that direction. That's kind of what I meant about being that leader figure for him. So yeah, that's a fantastic place to work your bed stay if that's the case. So, and you could even do it like a training session, like go put him on his bed, go turn the stove on, right? And then turn it off, then take him off, do it down, turn the stove on, whatever.
Like you're not like a live, like, hey, we're making dinner, just.
Yeah, just like a training session, you know? Sometimes with very specific triggers like that, it's better to work on it in a session like that as opposed to, perfect. As opposed to like when you're trying to cook, because if you're trying to cook, you're obviously focused on something. It's like if he's breaking it every 4 seconds, it's like it's gonna get frustrating, you know? Okay, so next we're gonna work on the hard one here, the come command. So I'm gonna take this leash off of him. I fully expect he's gonna run over to you guys, try to park himself by you guys, so we'll just work him through it as we need to. Come here, bud. Get this thing off of you. No. Obviously still making sure we're correcting for that jumping. So again, these first couple are usually pretty challenging because you see he's really, really glued to you right now. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give that come command. Stanley, come. No. Stanley, come. I know, the attitude. No. Stanley, come. So I'm just gonna work him through this here. No. Stanley, come. No. Stanley, come. Almost. No. Stanley, come. You gotta do it, dude. No. Stanley, come. And just stay right where you're at there. No. Stanley, come. He's like, let me try the other person here. A very normal second step for them. No. Stanley, come. It's like, and back to mom. You know what to do, bud. We've worked 9 gazillion of these. No. Stanley, come. No. Stanley, come. Now again, reiterating, this is super normal and this is arguably one of the most important reps of this send home lesson right now. Well, I'll talk about it in a minute. No. Come. Because you see his go-to right now in this case when he's next to you is the guarding behavior. Yeah. So we need to get him to realize he has to disengage from that, right? No. Stanley, come. There you go, buddy. I knew you could do it. Good work. So like I said, normal, right? I mean, this is the problem, you know what I mean? This is where, you know, we've seen all of these issues with him so far, or you guys have seen them at home, I should say, right? Is the fact that once he gets next to you, he feels like that is like the ultimate safe spot, right? He can't move away. And because he can't disengage from that, flight in his mind is not an option. His only option is fight, right? And you see right away the sassiness, the growling, this, that, right? Again, that's not him wanting to come over and try to attack me or anything. That's just him displaying his discomfort, right? So we have to teach him to work through that here. Stanley, come. So we'll work it again here. See what we get on this rep. Typically speaking, the next couple reps are a little bit easier. No. Stanley, come. He's like, how about Bet? How about Paige? How about you? Oh, so close. There you go, buddy.
Oh, gosh.
So again, not perfect, but significantly better than the first one,
Yeah.
right?
He took a long way, but he got there.
He got there. Okay. And we'll just do a couple of those here. Stanley, come. Almost.
Goodness.
Now he's just looking for options. He's like, now I don't know what to do. No. Stanley, come. He's like, maybe you'll help me. Good. Almost.
Oh, he's just cruising.
Good. There you go, big guy. There you go. Okay. Hey, look at that. Stanley, come. Good. You know, it's funny, we'll have some send home lessons that we do that like the dog is just so on it and like doesn't make a single mistake the whole time, which is like cool, but no.
Yeah.
Come. You guys have to see how to work through this stuff because you're gonna experience this. You know what I mean? And the only way to get past it is by understanding how to work through it. And it's interesting because once you work through that first one, like right now he's not perfect with the come command. We're gonna continue tightening this up here, but he's not doing the guard and growling, right? He's just trying to figure out what to do now.
Yeah.
Which is better than obviously what he was doing before. Not quite. No. Stanley, come. Good job. No. Come. You gotta stay right here though, dude. There you go. Good. Good job, bud. Okay. Stanley, come. No. Come. Good job, bud. That was a little bit better. Okay. A couple more of those. There you go, buddy. I know. It's hard work, dude. It's hard work. Okay. I think I'm supposed to stay by you now. Good. Okay. Oh, Jesus. All right, so now I'm gonna stand up, do some normal ones, obviously. Just wanted to work them through that here first. Stanley, come. Good. Okay. Stanley, come. Good. Okay. Stanley, come. Good. Okay. Stanley, come. Good. Okay. Give him one more second here. Give your correction again.
Nope.
And tell him down.
Down.
There we go, perfect. So notice second correction, he wasn't as vocal about it. Then third one, he was a little bit more vocal again about it. So this is where a couple things, right? Dogs can fluctuate a little bit as far as their sensation of the e-collar in different situations for whatever reason, right? Sometimes they'll let out vocalization because it's caught them off guard, right? They're not expecting it. And in a lot of cases, we'll see that the first couple times that the owners go to do it because he's not expecting it coming from you, right? You are the fun, awesome one, right? That never disciplines him for anything. So, you know, we always want to adjust that level based on them, right? So if I start noticing he's vocalizing a lot, I'll turn it down a little bit. Like we'll turn it down in a second here, obviously. But we do want to make sure it's still motivating. That really is the key with it. And then the consistency in which you provided those corrections, that was really, really good timing with all of that, right? And the second we start letting certain ones slide and we start, you know, giving a second down command here or there, again, giving that no without the correction, all of it starts to fall apart. So we really, really got to be consistent with that and try to get out of that state of mind. Like we don't want to correct you know, I get it, right? Nobody wants to like feel like they're hurting their dog or anything like that. But it is very, very important that we provide consistent consequences because that's the root of all of these problems that we're seeing, right? So let's do one more.
Okay. Down.
There we go. And notice how much faster that one was too, because we were consistent about the expectation. So let me see the remote real quick. So I'm going to turn it down just a little bit. There you go. Okay, go ahead and, oh, tell them no.
Oh, no.
Tap your button. You can still give a tap, still give a tap. Then tell them down again.
Down.
We'll talk about that as well in a second here. Perfect. So if we say no, we'll always follow up with that correction, even if they fix themselves, right? That formula of marking with no, giving our correction, and then giving our information of the command again stays consistent no matter what the dog does. And the cool thing about that in the use of the no marker and being able to delay that correction is there's going to be situations that remote's not in your hand at all times, right? Let's say you're in the house, remote's in the kitchen, you're in the living room, and whatever, he starts freaking out at the window at something or whatever, right? You could tell him no in that moment and identify that mistake and take like a picture of what he's doing. You could go all the way into the kitchen, get that remote, give your tap on it, and even if he's no longer rehearsing that behavior, as long as we identified it correctly, he'll still know what that correction is for, right? So basically, as long as the e-collar's on him, you'll never run into a situation where you're like caught off guard and there's like, we missed our opportunity to correct it, right? You just want to be quick with that marker, obviously. So, perfect. Go and release him.
Okay.
And then you guys can switch.
Just like how much he maybe regresses to
Yes.
his old stuff, but we'll probably know more in a week.
Yeah, I mean, you'll know over the next couple days. And the biggest thing, especially when we're working with dogs like him that I prep everybody for, is it's normal that you're going to see that. You know, a lot of people get really concerned, like first day the dog's home, they're like, he's not listening, right? And it's like, yes, we want him to listen, obviously, and we'll get him to listen. But he's got a lot of strongly ingrained habits, right, at home and associations with how he does things or doesn't do things with you, right? So you're kind of reversing a lot of those things at this point. You know, training is not necessarily this thing that, you know, we take and like we put on the dog and they're just like this trained dog, right? Training is like a communication system that we establish that is contingent on both parties using it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So all of those normal things like we talked about with the calling him out of the chair and all that kind of stuff, you're going to see all that kind of stuff, you know? But you have the tools at your disposal to work through it. And the biggest thing is if you start noticing and get anxious about stuff, whether it's in a reactive way or a guarding way or things like that, the best thing you could do in that moment is give direction, right? And then stay consistent about enforcing whatever that direction is that you want him to do, right? Whether it's you're in the house and he seems like he's getting just anxious and antsy and this and that, you know, bed stay, right? We're giving direction, we're focusing your little noodle on something right now, right? Same deal. Seems like he's a little extra glued up to you, right? Let's make sure we can disengage him if we need to, right? And once you've checked the boxes that in those states of mind we still have control over him, what winds up happening is we don't need to give that much direction anymore and we just use it where we need to. You know what I mean? So that's really the biggest thing with it. So, what other major issues in the house that we can come up with some plans for?
So I'm guessing we shouldn't like let him up on the couch and stuff.
The old furniture conversation. Okay, so here's the thing. I'm not anti-dogs on the furniture, right? Again, like my dogs used to be allowed on the furniture. The only reason why they're not anymore is because we got new furniture and we don't want dogs on it, right?
The problem is, since you're having such extreme guarding over you, it's a really, really bad idea to give him that intimate of access to you right now, right? Again, all of these types of things, he can earn those privileges back, and once he starts doing well with it, it's not gonna be a problem. But given the fact that he's guarding you, and given the fact in 2 months you're gonna have a baby in the house, and you're gonna need to feed on the, you know, potentially on the couch or on furniture and stuff like that, having him in that vulnerable position where he thinks he could go up there and get all kind of in your space and stuff like that is a really bad idea, right? Even dogs that don't have resource guarding issues, when people are having babies, I usually tell them nix the furniture access for a couple months, you know? Just because it creates separation and boundaries, you know what I mean? So I would say I would do it until the baby comes at least, you know, or at least until a month after the baby's here or something like that, you know, so you could set that firm boundary with him. The other cool thing about eliminating furniture access initially is it creates boundaries when there's no boundaries. You know, there's 24 hours in a day, maybe an hour of that time you're gonna be working training with him. The other 23 hours of the day, he's just gonna be hanging out, right, being a dog. So it's important in those 23 hours to have rules that he knows still apply and that there's consequences for if he breaks, right? And furniture becomes one of those things, obviously. So given the fact that furniture is gonna be something we're just gonna nix initially with him, we're not gonna tell him off or anything like that if he jumps on the furniture. We're just gonna tell him no and give a correction for it, right? I reserve off or like leave it or like any of those types of commands for things that the dog is sometimes allowed to do. And obviously the furniture access for right now is gonna be something he's not allowed to do at all, right? So you'll give that correction anytime he jumps onto it.
Okay.
What else you got? Keep going down the list.
I mean, food, toys, furniture.
I guess if we do see dogs on a walk and he's reacting, we just say no. And
Yeah, and the key with it is if he's in a controlled position, like we're doing our come command out on the walk, and we see another dog and he is trying to pull over towards them, and you're correcting at the right spot and everything, the other variable then is just is the level high enough, which we're gonna get into adjusting level on the e-collar and stuff. But you know, you always have two sides of the equation. If for whatever reason the dog is not listening, it's either gonna be a clarity issue where we're not being consistent about applying the boundaries, or it's a motivation issue where he doesn't care enough about the consequence. So another big hard thing I see for owners first week that the dog is home is finding that appropriate level. A lot of people, understandably so, tend to err on the light side with it and be too low with it. And the problem is if you're constantly just nagging with the corrections, sometimes it can kind of like piss them off more, you know? It's like poking the bear, right? Where I would rather err on the side of a little bit higher for some of those things and just kind of nip them in the butt. That way it's not this like reoccurring thing, right? I'd rather give 1 or 2 higher corrections than 15 lower ones to him, so.